Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and get the Board of Finance meeting for December 1st started. Present tonight are Carl Johnston, Gary Anino, Bernard Burdine, alternate, Sarah Nelson, Paul Simons, chairman, and Amy Friend tonight will be seated for an absent Dan Smith. Did I see Mike Anderson? And Mike Anderson. Was, yeah. Okay. Did I miss anybody? I think we have everybody here. First on the agenda are public comments. I'm not logged in, so can I see who's up? No hands. Oh, sorry, first selectman. I did, yeah. I'm so used to being up there.
Just quickly.
Please use the microphones. Could you use the microphone, please?
Okay. Hi. The last time I was here, I mentioned that the Board of Selectmen, because we have 2 new board members, are going to start doing field trips on 1 day a week. I thought it'd be beneficial for us to do those in before the budget season. Some of those things that you may not know about in town that they exist, but you don't know much about them. We scheduled our first 3. So all these little field trips are going to happen on Mondays at 2 o'clock. I know it's not really conducive to everyone to make them, but I just want to let you know they are available. The first 3 are December 6th, 13th, and 20th. We're going to skip Christmas week, and then we'll get back sometime after the first day to continue on. The first one on the 6th is going to be at the highway garage at 2 o'clock, where we'll get a tour of the garage and talk about the different trucks, machinery they have, and so on. On the 13th is going to be at the EMS building with fire company. Charlie Steinhart's going to have someone there to give us a tour there, look at the different machinery there, trucks. We'll get also a look at the ambulance system while we're there, and get a look at the building. The third one on the 20th is going to be at the Hewitt Farm. We're going to look at the Gallup House and also take a ride around in the park to see different issues they're up against as far as what fields they hay, what fields the town does, what fields they hire out, and so on. So this will be a good start. These 3 areas. We're still going to be doing probably going to get the van and do a ride around town as one for look at different sites in town that will become of interest when it comes time for the budget. We're going to do a transfer station visit and probably a senior center visit. These areas that people come to us and they ask for money or they're in the budget. And I know when I first was on the Board of Selectmen and someone asked me about different particular trucks or the highway garage, I wasn't that. It's just a way to get familiar with these items, and if we could, right now we're going to call these Selectmen Workshops. If for some reason we get board members from the Board of Finance that would like to come, I just don't know how many. If it's more than 3, because 4 is a quorum for you. If it's 3 or less, we'll just call it a Selectmen meeting. If it's 4 of you and 3 of us, we're going to call it a dual meeting, a joint meeting of Selectmen and Board of Finance. These are open to the public. I don't expect much public to come, but I just think it's a good way to familiarize yourself with things that will be on the budget later on that we'll be talking about. So that's it. Great.
How long?
Depends on what the trip is. So I'm thinking typically an hour. But if it's the ride around town one, that might be a little bit more because we have a big town. But I think the highway garage would be an hour. Transfer station might be a little bit more. Hewitt Farm would be an hour. Fire station would be about an hour. So they start at 2 and end about 3 o'clock.
I would like to come. I pick up kids at like 2:45 from now.
So except for maybe the ride around one, and maybe I can reschedule that for another time. But the ones that are at the station or at you, I'm not that far from school, so you can cut out early. And we're gonna just meet at these places with our own vehicles, so, you know. All right, just let me know later, between now and the 6th, if you want to attend the one on the 6th. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. More public here in the room.
I just wanted to make one mention. I noticed there was only one member of the Board of Finance at the last town meeting, so I thought I would say something. There was a lot of comments made, although the initial appropriation for the truck has passed, it passed the town meeting. There were comments other than myself against the idea of taking it out of the budget and handling it as an official appropriation. Probably know my feelings on it. If you're taking it out of the budget to use the budget, then you should basically be saying you're willing to live without it for a year. Emergent, obviously emergent things come up and should be handled that way or considered that way. But it was feedback other than myself against the way it was handled, and this meeting is on YouTube. To take a look and listen to some of the comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Paul,
Mike,
how are you?
I am
Yes.
well, my friend.
Good. I've been on for the last for the last 5 minutes. It's kind of hard to hear the public, and it was hard to hear Bob once he broke off. So just letting you know that.
No, I appreciate that. We're working on those batteries as we speak. So hopefully any more public comments in the room will be heard by all.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other public comments here in the room. Brian Rathman, you're recognized. Go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Mike just got there before I did. Yes, I couldn't hear all of Bob's presentation, and it's hard to hear anybody speaking from the finance board. I mean, I think it was just Paul that spoke when he opened the meeting, but it was very hard to understand. But I hear you're working on that problem, so, and I couldn't find a button to unraise my hand quick enough. All right, thanks.
No, I think I've only one that spoke so far, but the mics will be.
I thought when Sarah spoke, it was hard to hear too. So if you could just make sure that mic is pointing towards you when you're speaking, that's all.
I forgot to turn it on, Mike. Sorry about that.
Okay. No, it's fine now.
Good. I'll speak very loud for the rest of the
Okay.
meeting.
Great. Just leave this on so we don't have any issues like that. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands online. No more in the room. We'll go ahead to the third agenda item. Audit proposal presentation by King Associates. I believe that's who's on the screen for us now.
Yeah, that's me, Christopher King, and also Sean O'Grady is on the line with me.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us. Can we allow Sean to put up a kind of a little presentation on the screen? Would that be okay?
Yes, we're getting that.
Okay,
Give us 1 minute. She'll make you host.
sure. This is something that we do. We started doing it when we did our end of the audit reviews with boards, and so it's obviously a little bit different, but people tend to like it, and we can send it to you. You know, if the board chair wants it, we can send it, and then you can distribute it. Just to see it, have a little summary of what's going on. Are we still working on sharing? Probably.
You should be able to share now.
All right. I think Sean's going to try it for us.
Yep.
I think we can see it now. Can you see it pretty well? in the world of hybrid, it might work out actually better with a big screen. I don't know. Still kind of new territory. But again, thanks for having us. I'll jump ahead. We're going to talk about ourselves, but we have been here doing audits, mostly or focusing a lot on governments for a number of years. I've been doing it since '93. Sean's been with us for a while. Sean was recently named partner. So I've been partner for a while. Sean is now a partner, and he works almost exclusively in the municipal auditing realm. So we'll jump right into our profile page. We did start over 35 years ago. I wasn't here, but we started with 0 clients, started from scratch. We now have, we're an established practice, and in our part of the state, we're pretty well known. We've been doing a lot more work over on the eastern side of the state. Hopefully you saw our references in our proposal that we sent over. So a lot of your neighboring towns we've been working in probably for the past 4 or 5 years. And that's just kind of a way that the market has gone, and the regulation that's gone into municipal audits. It's not getting any easier. And I'm sure, on the inside, the accounting side for both the town side and the Board of Ed has just requirements have become more and more onerous, more complicated, more technical all the time. So we've been doing these audits for a long time. It started off, my understanding is that years ago, people would do a town in the summer to keep them busy when it wasn't tax season, and when it was relatively simple and it was kind of the Wild West. Without much oversight, but now there's more oversight over the municipal audits than virtually any other industry. So we're doing towns. Sometimes there's boroughs inside the towns. We're much smaller. We do some regional school districts. Sometimes there are 2 towns, could be up to 5 towns, K through 12. Some are just high schools or just middle schools and high schools. And we do all sorts of other kind of smaller regional districts. Got the councils of governments, which are smaller but really complicated due to their grant funding. Health districts, same thing, not really large entities, but very complicated. I think we lost our sharing, Sean.
Yeah, I was trying to move it to my screen in front of me, so I'm not looking away from you guys.
Okay. So during that time, as I mentioned, the firm started with 0 clients, and it was Bob King started it by himself. We now have over 20 employees, 18 full-time professionals with accounting degrees. 5 of us are CPAs, and we're a little atypical for the local CPA firm because we do audits year-round, whether they're government audits or nonprofit audits. Nonprofit audits have some similarities in that they have grant funding and require these state single audits similar to a town, and also federal single audits, which for a town like you they're probably, you may have had one with a bridge project in the past or a block grant for a senior center, but you won't have them every year. Maybe you'll have one next year with ARPA funding. We know that we belong to almost every organization that pertains to government accounting and auditing. So the American, the National, basically Trade Association, AICPA, they have a government audit quality center that focuses on this area. Sean is a CFE, so he has his association with the certified fraud examiners. Then there's the GFOA, and the state chapter of the GFOA, which provides some good training and resources, more for government positions. They're not so much for auditors, but for the people working in the towns and in the districts. And we're also on our state societies has a governmental accounting committee. So we're on that, the nonprofit committee, and I'm on the peer review committee. All the firms that do audits, we actually get audited ourselves every 3 years. So it's a good reminder of going through the audit process. So we're audited by a peer, a qualified peer. Just as doing municipal audits has become a specialty, being a municipal peer reviewer has also become a specialty, to the point where I'm the only person in the state of Connecticut that can actually perform our peer review, which is actually impossible. So we have to get a firm out in Buffalo to do that peer review for us. And that's actually going to happen next week. So our next slide, again, we're just telling you more and more about ourselves. I think I've covered what we do. Just because of the increasing regulation, unfortunately, a lot of CPA firms have decided that they just don't want to be in this area. And it's really actually as broad as the whole auditing arena. It's not just governments. There are fewer firms doing audits in general, and even fewer that are doing government audits. So we're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of the smaller firms, local firms, are just getting out of preparing financial statements, which means it's left to those of us who have a concentration in this in a large practice. So it's come to the point where we are in the top 4 in the number of municipalities submitted to OPM every year as audits. A lot of those audits are subject to government auditing standards. Sometimes it's called the Yellow Book. State single audits, federal single audits. You do have a state single audit every year, and I expect you to continue to have that, because the threshold for that is $300,000 a year of state grants, and you get well over that. Hopefully you'll continue to get well over that. We also, in this kind of third bullet, it mentions this, I'll just use the initials, the ACFR, which is an optional higher level of reporting. It includes supplemental schedules that are not required. A number of towns do that. They elect to do that. They feel that it helps them in their bond ratings because it reflects on the kind of the tone of the management of the town. You're not doing that currently. Anybody has the option to do it. It does have costs associated with it. It takes longer to put it together, so you have to pay your auditors more. There's some time required by the town people to accumulate some extra data. And then, of course, the GFOA has a fee to review it. It's a fee to participate in their award program. In addition to doing audits, we do a lot of consulting. We have one person at the firm actually is kind of a part-time finance director for 2 or 3 towns. So we have that experience of being able to work on the inside, and we share that knowledge of being an inside government person with our external auditing jobs. We help people with special projects. One of the ones that's pretty hot right now is we've been helping a lot of our towns with the calculation of this revenue loss calculation with the ARPA money. I don't know where you are on that, but in a nutshell, you have several specific designated uses for that fund or for those funds, or you can do a revenue calculation and try to kind of unrestrict that money. And that recalculation starting now, and it's actually going to happen over the next couple of years if people desire to try to release those monies into unrestricted uses. The last bullet tells you that we do have clients. It's ended up all over the state at this point. We did start out primarily in Northwest Connecticut. Then we went to the center of the state. Then we went east of the river. We've gone south, so we go down to the shore. We go all the way out to the Rhode Island line. So we don't have anything in Middlesex, which is always kind of funny. But it's a small little county. There's not that many towns in it. Audit approach. So we do have, auditors have a set of standards that are adopted and should be uniform, and then they're applied differently depending on the firm. But we all start from an adopted central set of standards. And then we have developed our own custom testing procedures that we've developed over the years with our experience. And we'll just go through those. The tax office, obviously the tax office has a lot of revenue going through it. There is also cash that goes through that as part of the revenue. So we do focus a lot on the tax office. We have various types of tests, predictive, we're trying to figure out how much revenue should we expect to come in, and then we compare it to what actually did come in. Testing the controls. Can we find any exceptions to the calculations that should be happening automatically? We list recalculations, reconciliations, ratio analysis. We test some key numbers. For example, we look at taxes receivable, and we compare the outstanding taxes at year end to the annual levy. And we kind of have developed an industry experiences where we know what range that should fall in. And if it falls outside that range, then we might modify our testing further and react to that and figure out, why is this town outside of the range that we would normally expect to see? Student activity counts at the schools, and even more so at the high school. Student activities collect a lot of cash, small amounts of cash. When there is a problem at a school that you see in the newspaper regarding finances, a lot of times it revolves around the student activity accounts. It did happen in one of ours, but the controls were such that they detected it, like they detected it on the first deposit that went awry, and then they did a little investigation and were able to tell us when we showed up for the audit that, hey, we had a problem with student activity fund. Thanks to the controls we had in place, we detected it, we figured out who was doing it, the person's no longer with us. Cafeteria fund, again, similar type thing, until more recently when everyone went on free lunch. But cafeteria fund used to be a source of cash, and I guess you could say much less now that a lot of programs have gone to cards, like prepaid cards where the parents put money on, so that it's just a balance on the cards or on their student accounts. There's been some issues with grant reporting, over-reporting number of lunches that were sold and things like that. So, and it's actually not in here in detail, but more our newest kind of area of emphasis is in building permits. We've been testing permit fees in the building offices, and also comparing them to the COCs or the COs and seeing how they are added to the grand list. Some of our towns are asking us why we're looking at that, and we remind them that the taxes are the largest source of revenue to the town. And if there are omissions from the grand list, then there are lost revenues. So that's something we've been working on more recently, developing some of our own proprietary tests. The next page, actually, I think Sean was going to take the next series of pages here.
I'm just going to add into the approach and methodology page. At the beginning of the year, we do kind of brainstorm like a new area we might want to roll out a different test or different areas we want to look at. So you don't get the same tests every year. You'll get some surprise tests, different stuff each year. And so a little bit about when we perform the engagement. We believe in continuity and objectivity. So you're going to have a consistent contact person, and you're also going to get some rotation. So each year you'll have like a fresh set of eyes looking. So you're not going to have people just glazing over the audit reports, and you'll get questions. We find it's more effective. We also have staff turnover below the industry average. So that's where you get the continuity with your auditor. And we've had some clients over 20 years. maybe longer now. And we put together this chart just to kind of show you where you guys fit in based on our current like towns. As you can see, you guys are pretty much right in the center based on size. And then the last slide is kind of a recap. Why are we a good choice for you guys? Chris touched on a lot of this, but our client profile, our population ranges are from the smallest in the state to about 24,000. And the most of them are between 3 and 10,000. And you guys are about 5,200. So you kind of fall right in the middle of that. Chris is the only CPA in Connecticut qualified to review the town engagements in a CPA firm's peer review process. So he's got a lot of knowledge in regards to the town audits. We're able to provide a broad range of additional services as they come up. We could do the ARPA calculations, any kinds of tax questions that come up, special studies. Chris has done some water and sewer rate studies. This is kind of a cliche, but we're large enough to have the answers you need, yet small enough to give you the attention you deserve. And we would invite you to contact some of our references. There was 4 of them listed in the proposal, but we can give you as many more as you would like. And that takes us to the end. Anybody has any questions?
Yeah, we've talked about ourselves for a long time, so at this point, whatever the board chair would like to do, we'll go along with that.
No, thank you for the presentation. I was just taking some notes as we were talking through. So a couple of questions that I had, you'd already answered. Do you represent towns our size? Looks like you do, both from a budget and a population. Could you speak again about that peer review comment you had? So no one local.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I mean, it doesn't impact you directly. It's just kind of an illustration of the kind of the expertise we have in the area. Again, this peer review, it's a CPA firm audits another CPA firm to make sure that checks on the quality of the audit performance. And there are just so few people left doing municipal work, and so few people that are qualified to do peer reviews. I happen to hit both of those. So I'm doing work for firms in Maine. So there's auditors in Maine, auditing towns in Maine. I do some work for them. I do some work in Vermont. I'm not only am I seeing a lot of stuff that's happening in the state, but I'm seeing what's happening in other states.
Okay, thank you for that. And just one other question I had before the rest of the board can, or your questions. You talked about the ARPA funds and how we can do a revenue calculation to loosen up the uses for those funds. Can you speak a little bit on that, just for my own education?
Sure. A complicated topic. We'll try to unravel it, but if you've seen the ARPA, the original initial guidance, or what they call the interim final rule, we're awaiting a final rule. They had identified that you could spend the ARPA funds on, say, broadband and water and sewer, and a couple of assistance to nonprofits, assistance to individuals. There was this one category called revenue loss, and a lot of towns initially said, "Oh, we don't qualify for that. We didn't have a revenue loss." But there's a built-in kind of a safe harbor type thing. It assumes if you don't do your own calculation, you can assume a 4.1% increase in revenues. So what some towns did, for example, is they kept the mill rate the same. They said, this is not the time to increase taxes, or we keep it the same. So by doing that, you actually have a revenue loss, and we're doing them now. And so we just, a town, it's on my desk now, we determined that based on this calculation, this projected trend of where the revenue would be, they're 500,000 below that. So they can take 500,000 of their ARPA money and use it for general government operations. So that could be for almost anything that would normally be in your budget, except for, I think, debt service and maybe pension contributions. But you can take, I don't know, just some capital project that keeps getting pushed off. Now use the ARPA funds to pay for that because you've done this test to prove that it can be released into unrestricted due to this revenue loss calculation. And if it's only, let's say your ARPA money was $1 million and the first pass, the measurement was for 2020, only releases 500,000. Well, you get to test it again for 21, 22, and 23. So again, it assumes this trajectory of 4.1% growth a year, and every year you're below that, you can move some of that ARPA money into this unrestricted pot, which then gives you a lot more freedom on what you can spend it on.
Yeah, it sounds like it would.
And a lot of people initially, don't consider it because, oh, we didn't lose revenue.
If you had a big grant project in your base year too, that's not in your future years, that would help to spike your base year. So you might be under in your future years.
Yeah, the first one we did, they had a high school construction grant in 19, which is the base year. And so then obviously they didn't get that into future years. So they actually had an exaggerated revenue loss because they are right off the bat, it was like $1.8 million. They were behind the base year just because they had that school construction grant. So they pretty much opened up their entire ARPA fund into the unrestricted pot with the first calculation.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else on the Board of Finance have any questions? Gary?
Does that, you mentioned it was available for a capital project. Is it available for removing a stranded asset? So if you were able to free up that fund and use it in the general fund?
I'm not sure if I'm going to answer the question right, but you can actually plug it into the general fund as a financing source, but generally the recommendation is to keep it in a separate grants fund.
Yep.
And once you release it in unrestricted, there are few restrictions. Like I mentioned, debt service and pension, and I don't know if Sean remembers anymore. But
No, you had said capital, so I was concerned about creating an asset versus removing a stranded asset.
I guess I'm not sure of your what the definition would be of a stranded asset.
Are you talking about just taking it out of unearned?
Yeah, can we fund a demolition project?
Oh, all right. So I think we call it an impaired asset.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. I think so.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know we want to talk more about your presentation versus our specific questions, but anything else on the proposal for this firm? Mike was first. Mike, please go right ahead.
That the ACFR, that's not in your proposal right now, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
What does that cost if we wanted to do it?
And Sean can correct me, but I think about 5,000.
Yeah,
for
it's-
us.
and it's a lot of work too on the town because you have to compile all this 10-year data. So you have to go back 10 years to get all this data.
I mean, it's not something that, I mean, we're kind of hopefully done with, major debt projects right now. The fact that we had a strong undesignated fund helped us in the debt market when we built the schools, and we don't have any big projects on the books right now, but if there was something that coming down the pike, that'd be something we might want to consider to make sure we can show what our fiscal profile is. That's basically what you said, right? It helps, show what your fiscal profile is.
Yeah, I've talked to one of these bond advisors about it. And his summary was, because I was asking, what impact does it really have? You know, if a town spends money just for this, is it really worth it? He said his impression is that a lot of times the bond raters will say, you know, but so many people do have it. Why doesn't this town have it? You know, like if you don't have it, you stick out. I don't think it's quite that exaggerated. Definitely the larger the town, the more prevalent it is. And I don't think you'd want to get into it just to do for a year or two. You know, I think if you were going to do it, I think you'd want to stay in it, because it is a bit of work. Like Sean said, you know, the town staff are going to have to start working on collecting 10 years worth of statistical data. So once you do it, you really, I would think a long-term endeavor.
Okay. Who would be the lead person this year? You said you had a team and one person would be the consistent head. Do you have someone in mind that would be that person for us?
Well, it'd likely be Sean.
Okay.
And I would say definitely for the first year. You know, he always takes care of new clients, make sure that are set up and rolling forward. And then, you know, it's sometimes it depends on the client. We have some clients who request some changes, so that forces us to move people around. And then, like Sean said, we do always have some fresh eyes, but we tend not to make major changes, because that knowledge of the client really it helps with effectiveness. You know, if you really understand the processes, you can, you know, look deeper and maybe see variations from the norm. And the town personnel like it too, when you don't have to ask them the same questions over and over.
Right. But I like the fact that you have someone, you rotate the people that are also working on the project to get fresh eyes on it. That's something that we see in the nonprofit world that's important to, so you're not having, you know, you're missing something because someone has seen it over and over again. So
You won't just glaze over it.
Right, exactly. I guess the last question, and don't think that I don't think that you guys are worth it, but is the price negotiable?
No.
Be remiss not to ask.
Yeah, I can tell you from the nonprofit world.
That's all I have. Thank you, guys. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Mike, thank you.
I think Sarah Nelson's up next.
Yeah, I just had a question. So I see your references, Griswold, Lisbon, Salem, Preston. How long have you been with each of them?
Lisbon, I think since 2019. Griswold was 2020. Salem is new this year, and Preston was 2020.
Okay. And then just a follow-on question to what Mike asked. So Sean, sounds like you're going to be stuck with us. And I noticed in the proposal, it said the primary engagement will be the audit manager. And that's a different role, obviously, than the audit partner. Is that person expected to be fairly consistent?
Yeah, so me and Chris will both be like overseeing the engagement, and then a lot of the contact will be with me, and then we're gonna have like a manager or a lead on it as well. So I don't think we've decided who that'll be, since it's not until next year, but then that person would be consistent.
And how many people typically are involved in, like, how many people, because we have one Christine, she's amazing, but how many people will be interacting with her?
It would mostly be me, Chris, I guess, and then the lead. And then if there's probably 4 of us that would work on it in the field. And then the 2 other people that come, those are the ones that would usually rotate. And if they had to ask a question or something, they might send an email, but it wouldn't be like overburdening to her.
Okay, and sorry, last question. This, I think the last couple of audits we had were actually remote because of COVID. Is your proposal for remote or on-prem?
We do, however, the town or organization likes, but most of ours have been on site.
Okay, Thank
We do a fair amount of work in advance. And we think this kind of helps so that we don't overload people. The town people, when we come on site, we do a list in advance and we get trial balances and a bunch of reports, maybe 2 weeks early. And then, so we do a lot of it, I shouldn't say a lot, but we do a fair portion of it in advance, so that when we're on site, it really is the things that we need to do with the people that are there between, a day or 2 at the town and a day or 2 over at the Board of Ed. Plus, we always come out earlier. We come out in May or June. And at that point, we focus a lot on the tax offices, tax collector, tax assessor. But we try to send out lists of things that we want. So if we want a bunch of invoices, we won't pull it at 10 o'clock in the morning and sit around hoping that we have it by 11. From those initial reports that we got in advance, we would pull the lists, send them over to the town, hopefully a number of days in advance to give them time to get all those documents together. So when we come up, hopefully they can just say, throw them on a table, say, here's all the stuff you asked for. We start working with it. We're kind of almost set up for the remote world when it happened because we can do a lot in advance. But there is something about seeing a person face to face, that in-person interaction, you can read a person better. It's better for Q&A.
It's a lot easier on the town too, if they don't have to scan in 100 invoices and all the supporting documentation.
Yeah, you don't want to have to unstaple all those documents, run through the scanner, staple them again.
I lied, I have one more question. I don't know if Christine may have shared this with you. We are in the process of shifting to new software, Infinite Vision. Yeah, just curious if you're familiar with and have seen towns transition over to that.
Well, we're familiar with the seamless accounting conversion. No, I mean, what were you using before?
So we're currently using QuickBooks on the town side. Board of Ed transitioned to Infinite Visions last year. We're doing the transition. So this full year will be in QuickBooks and then we'll start Infinite Visions next year. So you would have 1 year of half Infinite Visions, half QuickBooks with town and Board of Ed. And then the second year, everything would be in Infinite Visions.
Yeah, price is definitely not negotiable, Mike. So that's quite a jump for you to go from QuickBooks to Infinite Visions. We are familiar with it and a lot of people have moved to it. I mean, a lot of people, some of the other softwares have gone away or not supported very well. It's always a struggle for, I don't know, maybe it's not a struggle for you, but it's a lot of work for the towns to do that.
How is your conversion going?
My first meeting is tomorrow, so
Yeah.
we're embarking on an exciting adventure.
So at this point, it's still seamless.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of people switched this year when the old software kind of stopped supporting, and they've all said it's been pretty difficult. Just as like a heads up.
We're going to be great. It's going to be awesome. So
Yeah, it's a good software. You know, it's a big package, especially compared to QuickBooks. And like Sean said, I think it was Phoenix that ended. So the Board of Ed, a lot of Board of Eds had Phoenix, and they had to switch over to something. So at least with Infinite Visions, a lot of your neighbors are going to have it too.
Yeah, that's our Board of Ed was on Phoenix, so that's why they transitioned. So they were in that whole package with Learn, where Preston transitioned and we transitioned, well, our Board of Ed transitioned, and that's why the town's moving over to it now. So like I said, it's gonna be great.
All right,
I'm done.
thank you.
Thank you.
What other questions do we have from the Board of Finance? Please go right ahead.
Okay, so again, this is Christine. So how long does it typically take you to audit a town of our size? Like how many days is the actual onsite?
So for interim, like the May, June time, we'll come out for probably 2 or 3 days. Maybe 2 at the town, 1 at the BOE, or 1 at the town, 1 at the BOE. And then when we come back out in the fall, we'll probably do 2 at the town and 1 at the BOE. And then we go back to the office, kind of put all the work together, and then start going through it. And if we have questions, we'll communicate via email and phone. We do a lot of the planning work ahead of time before we come, so we're not just sitting in your office bugging you by being there, I guess.
And then you said in your proposal that typically the first audit takes much more time. And I do understand that because you need to understand our practices and how things go. Not to harp on Mike's point, but if the first year is more work intensive, then why doesn't the price plateau at that instead of continuing to go up and up, since you're going to be doing the most time the first year? And theoretically, this is based on the amount of time you guys are investing.
So if it was a 1 year, it would cost a lot more than like a 3 or a 5 year, just because you kind of spread it out so it's even over the 5 years or 3 years.
Okay, I had to ask. So.
Great, thank you. So nothing else from the Board of Finance? Nothing here? Is Christine set? Mike is set? Oh, is Mike's hand waving or just waving goodbye? A question, please, Mike, go right ahead.
Does, do past audits from our other auditors, does that help you guys at all?
Yes, or go ahead, Chris.
Yes and no. I mean, a lot of the note disclosures we can copy over, but we tend to find that there are some necessary changes that need to be made to update people. That's often what we find. So we do use it as a starting point, but it doesn't end up the way it starts. It doesn't look the way at the end when it does in the beginning.
Yeah, so we'll pull down the prior year reports and we'll use that as like our backbone when we start setting everything up.
Okay.
I'm not sure, Christine, do we have this slide deck for the Board of Finance members? Is that possible to receive from you, Sean, or?
Yep, I'll email it to you right after the meeting.
Chris?
Or
I
I'll email it
appreciate
to Christine.
Great, thank you. If there's nothing else, I guess we'll have some work to do on our end to look at the proposal and talk some more through it, and then we'll have some updates to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, we appreciate it. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you too.
Bye.
So they off? They probably can. But yeah. So just to continue with this topic, do we have anything change with other proposals? So this is the one we have.
Yeah, so we did solicit from multiple firms to try to make sure we had a pool. This was the only proposal that we received, so.
Okay. So
Gary has
oh, please go ahead.
Have we been, and I'm new to the board, so forgive. have you been through, is the bid compliant with the RFP? I mean, the RFP is 17 pages long. I just cruised through it on my phone. Do we know that what they provided aligns with what we asked for?
I think it does.
We should probably, yeah, we might want to tick the boxes on that just
Yeah,
to make
go
sure.
through it a bit slower. So do we have a deadline? We really do, right? We need to have something in place in short order, right?
When do we file? We have to file with the state, the auditor. When is that?
I think it's the end of the year,
I think it is too.
but I need to double check.
Yeah. I mean, again, they said a lot of the right things tonight. I think it scares me, but I've always, N equals one. So it's always like, we have one quote that's
I
not the
just,
best position to be in. guess.
I don't know what other alternative we have
Right,
because
no.
I solicited other firms and got no response. So we put it on the state bid list, we put it on the town site. You know, the last time we put it out, we didn't get proposals. I
Yeah.
think because it's a small town, small budget, and they still have to put the same amount of work into it, it's hard.
Yeah, no, I understand.
How did these fees line up from what we paid last year?
The last contract with our current auditor was $31,500. So it's definitely an increase.
And we would be, are we doing the federal single audit if necessary? Is that?
So our current auditor had the same thing in her engagement
Yeah.
letter. So if we had to have it, it is an extra amount of work that they have to do. So it was an extra fee for her as well. We just haven't had to have one to this point, but because of the rescue plan funds, we most likely will need to have one because the Board of Ed is receiving a substantial amount of money as well as the town.
Yeah.
So it all depends how much money is actually expended by both parties in the current, in the year. So,
Okay, so just, I don't know if the public, so Christine had mentioned 31K last year. We're looking at 39 total for the first year, plus the 3,600 if we do a federal single audit. And I would almost question whether we should anyway, because if we get it next year, wouldn't it be good if we already had everything?
it literally just has to do with thresholds that you spend. So
Yeah.
like, that's why we have to have the single state because we get a certain amount of money from the state.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't do it if we don't meet that threshold.
You think our chances are slim to none that any other bidders would come in?
I don't know how we would get them. I mean, we handled the process the way we are supposed to handle the process.
Right.
At that point, you're kind of circumventing your own process.
No, I get you. I get
And the
you.
RFP says we'll select by December 1 anyway.
Mm.
And we'll have a contract at 30 days, so we're kind
Yeah.
of. The questions and answers, those are questions from the bidders, which we responded to.
Those were questions that actually came from a different person who did not submit a proposal. I guess so.
I mean, we gave the last 5 years of what we paid for auditing because they asked, which I guess is right, but
I mean, it's public information. It's
Right.
in our
Yep.
audits. So.
Mike, were you raising your hand for a question there or just gesturing?
No, I'm raising my hand. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if, with the RFP and, they're the only people that showed up, I think you can't go beyond the period. I think you guys probably just said that, but as far as like when we have to designate that, the statute 7-396. It says at least 30 days before the end of the fiscal period of such regional school district municipality, ... So that's 30 days before the end of June, as far as I'm reading it.
I know that's what the statute says, which is why I said I'm unclear, because I've been told by other people that it needs to be by the end of, before January 1st, and then I read the statute. So that's why I need to double check that with someone. I don't know who that someone is.
Right.
Because if that's the case, I mean, you can put out another RFP if we want to and have time to get it, but we're talking about, $8,000 and I find these guys' qualifications pretty stellar, so I don't know if it's worth going out there and doing it again to maybe not get a bid from anybody.
No, I can understand. I mean, I just wasn't sure how comfortable the entire board was with just a single firm coming in. I don't question their credentials. I mean, it seems like they can certainly do this job. They have towns our size, but do we have to make a decision on this tonight? Or is it really just before the end of the year, we think? Until you check with somebody to be named later.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
And again, saying, I contacted multiple firms, we put it out on all the right
Mhm.
channels. How do we get additional proposals if we put it out again?
I think that was a bit of a surprise to them that we're changing platforms. And I think that $8,000 isn't going to make up for, basically, they're going to have to do two baselines.
That was in the RFP, so they can be surprised, but it was in the RFP.
No, but it's, I mean, I don't think from a hours perspective, it's too far out of whack from what they're going to have to do.
I agree. I think it's a risk, honestly, to not, I think they were qualified. I think I appreciated their proposal. I appreciated some of the other kind of things they threw out there to say, hey, we could also help with this. I know it's an upsell, but it's good stuff to know. So I don't see any major red flags. And I actually would be more concerned about losing them or having them come back and say, we know we're the only guys in town, right? So we could
Here's the
charge
new
more,
number, here's the new
right?
number,
And I don't think they would do that, but that's a risk. And I think we're a niche town and we need we're getting a niche auditor. Like, that's just the reality of it. Like, there's not probably a lot of auditors that want to take on a town this size. So.
Carl, go ahead.
I think Sarah's right as far as we set it aside for a minute and then them realizing there is nobody else and might come back again. And at the same time, the auditor you had the last few years, past 12 or 13 years, may have been holding her price as an even number and not gaining any extra for the time. So I think you guys are in the ballpark, and I'm new to this too. So where I'm sitting right next to Gary, the two new guys on the end. But it sounds that I think you ought to go for it, even though it is only one person.
Right.
Paul, if I may, Carl,
Please.
I agree with you completely, and Sarah. Not to mention the fact that, as he said, there are less and less firms doing this. Now, we know Sarah's out. And so the less competition, the greater the prices are going to be. There's not enough, fish in the sea to go out there after. And we're seeing that in what we got for the for how many people responded. So I have no problem going forward with these guys.
Sean, please go right ahead. Sean from the public.
I just had one
Treasurer,
question.
yes, sorry.
References have been checked and what was found out from other towns such as,
I did not check references. Paul, did you check?
I did not know.
It was on my tick list, but.
Yeah.
Roger said.
just seems like
We've
it'd be
looked-
good to know if Preston's been with them for a year, Salem's been with them how many years? What,
It's been some pretty new.
is there anything negative, that we should consider?
I think at the same time, you ought to ask them for a couple that they've had for a longer time. If we're gonna hold off for a couple days and check references, those are all within 2 or 3 years. See if you can find at least 1 or 2 that have been with them a couple years longer.
So our next meeting for another opportunity to vote on something like this is the 15th. So
Unless you do a special in the middle just for a vote after the references are checked.
right.
We
right.
could vote contingent on references.
You good?
I see no harm waiting.
All right. I don't think there's a flight risk here or anything like that. right? Okay.
What
So
what did Sarah say as far as vote on it with references checked?
those contingencies are out there,
Yeah.
but Christina suggested that maybe it's not too much of a risk to wait these next 2 weeks before we actually make the motion to vote on this King Associates for this proposal.
Can you just make the ask that they hold the price until the 15th while we check their references? It's a way of sort of,
I think in our RFP, we said
That was gonna be my next question.
right,
What's the window?
yeah, but I've done this before. When they're looking at winning or losing, they're willing to wait.
And when?
we said, sorry, Mike, I know you can't hear me when I'm just talking. We said that we anticipated selecting no later than December 15th, so we can wait until the 15th per all the specs that we put in.
That's it. I thought it said the first.
It said presentations on the 1st.
I'm flipping through again.
Since Sarah Wellwood was our auditor and she decided not to continue on, it was her decision, not ours. Did she recommend, or could she recommend an order that we could use? I mean, if she's on her way out, she must know other.
I asked
competitive-
her, she said she could not.
She couldn't or she wouldn't?
She couldn't, she didn't have anybody to give me.
Oh. Thank you.
So I did ask because she knew we were sending out the request for proposals. So I said, you know, Sandy, who else can I send this to? And she did not have a recommendation. So,
I'm reading section D, final selection. It's anticipated the firm will be selected and notified no later than December 1st, 2021. Following notification of the firm selected, it's expected the contract will be executed by both parties within 30 days of approval. So I'm fine with it, Christine. I just think we ought to, out of courtesy, call them up and say, we want to check references. Can you hold it for 15
are
days?
you looking on the one that was posted on the website or the draft that was sent out to you guys?
I'm looking at the one on the website.
Because I'm looking at the one on the website too, and it says December. Oral presentations if required, December 1st, appointment by the Board of Finance no later than December 15th on page 8.
I'm on page 13 of 17.
Well,
We could take this offline, but I think we ought to let them know. We
Right.
want to check their references. We
Yeah.
plan to make an appointment on the 15th. Will they hold their bid?
I'm
Because
impressed
that way
with-
we're protected.
Yeah, I think so. We're impressed with the presentation and we just need a couple more questions answered. And we expect to have a vote on this on or before the 15th.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
yes. Can one of you do the reference checks?
Thanks, McCall. That would be in the minutes too, so I guess I have to do that.
Make sure that's. in the record.
That's right, that's right. Okay, I guess that's it on that topic. Ready to move on? Don't see any more hands up. Mike is waiting for us. Next line item is correspondence. I have none.
Hi, if anybody wants a recap of the town meeting, I'm happy to give it.
Please, we got a few minutes. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So there were a couple comments. Mr. Murphy mentioned it earlier, and definitely, you know, the truck was removed from the budget because we were hoping we would get ARPA funds to be able to use it. But the general sentiment of the town, I think, is similar to what we've heard at all previous town
Right.
meetings, which is you pass the budget and then you come and you ask for like all of these sort of a la carte items, and we don't want to do that. So I do think it's something we should talk about in terms of our strategy for budget, and just maybe if we can, all get on the same page about what our guiding principles are.
Right.
Whether we want to à la carte the budget to help keep taxes low, or whether we want to avoid doing that going forward.
No, I understand. I mean, I think the thought process was that those one-time expenditures that we could keep them out of the budget so we don't raise taxes, but those are capital items, so they would be essentially even within the budget of one-time expenditure anyway. So
Mhm.
maybe we should just, when we have a need like that, whether we don't know how great the need is, we should maintain them in the budget.
Yeah.
I've always been one in the past in favor to keep these one-time items off if we could, to keep those mill rate low, but we're not buying a truck every year, so it wouldn't be on the following year's budget anyway.
Yeah. Carrie, did you go to the Capitol? You go to Capitol meeting? Oh, it's tomorrow.
It's on Monday at
It's
5
the
o'clock.
8th, isn't there something?
Monday, the 6th.
6th, close. Didn't include. I'm looking forward to it, though.
You can tell. Please go right ahead.
So on some of those objects that were removed from the budget, is there any way of them coming to forward to say they are not really needed? An explanation, like Bob had brought up, if he had known that truck was falling apart,
Right.
you guys would have been more informed at the time when they told they were going to try and remove it or not remove it. So that was kind of a foresight on whoever took it out the first time. On that one particular item. The other items were kind of just, I think, removed to move the budget down. And one slim note, I don't know if we can do it or not, but you have is it a contingency fund or a fund for the school that they hold on to for their objects? Well, we have a fire department that needs items all the time. We have highway department needs items all the time. I don't know if we could eventually start slowly putting money aside for their capital things, so it's not a surprise every 3 or 4 years.
So the previous Board of Selectmen, who were the only Board of Selectmen I worked with in my tenure here, they tried to have a planful approach. And that was what the Capital Improvement Work Group was trying to do, was to put money aside to plan for things. So we didn't have to do a lump sum purchase or also to do leases. And those were the things that were always eliminated from the capital budget. So the town is not able to make so the non-lapsing account for the Board of Education is allowed by statute. If we allocate money in the capital budget, in capital line items, that is its own savings account for those projects. There's no way to just have a designated amount that we're saving towards. That's why we put them in the capital budget. And then those are supposed to be savings to then save up and buy those projects, buy those items or do those projects. And then like we have the town building maintenance line, that's a savings account to fix the town buildings. And that again was one of those items that the money was removed from last year because there was money in that account. So we were told we didn't need it. So I think this Board of Finance, when you have your next item of budget guidance, you need to talk about if you think that the Capital Improvement Work Group and the Board of Selectmen should be having a planful budget, or if the town is going to take the approach of fund them as large one-time expenses in the budget or outside of the budget. But we need that direction so that we can go ahead and execute it. And then everyone needs to stay on the same page as we go through the budget process.
Right. So I think, again, it's always been kind of a wishy-washy thing, right? So no one wants to raise the mill rate and we're fearful that a budget won't pass, so we gotta lower this thing down. But that,
Yeah, it's a math problem.
it really is.
We are lucky enough to live in this amazing town with only 5,000 people, but we have to pay for that.
That's
so
right, that's right.
It's a math problem.
Paul,
Mike,
since, we're doing these outside the budget appropriation town meeting type things for these one-time capital expenditures, as we go through the budget process, and to be in line with, what the Board of Selectmen and the committee, well, the work group, the capital projects work group come up with, since you're using the undesignated funds for these appropriations throughout the year, unlike what we did in the last 2 years of filling the whole budget gap with the undesignated funds, once we get that back to square, if there are additional capital improvements, one-time expenditures, if we don't want to raise the mill rate particularly, but we think those capital expenditures are important, that's when we can say, all right, we can bring in the money from the undesignated fund for that particular capital improvement budget. So then it's a zero sum, because it's not something that's going to repeat next year.
Right, that's a good thought. I mean,
You
it's,
see what I'm saying? So, because we're doing it anyway, outside the budget, let the people decide, we want to have this capital improvement, and then we let them know, look, by the way, it's a zero sum to you guys. It's not raising the mill rate. And that's as long as we maintain our healthy undesignated fund. Obviously, we don't want to deplete it, but we do have a policy that says we can go down to 8.5%. We need some things, and that may be a way to do it, and still let the town decide, do we want to include this in the budget?
yeah, once the budget is balanced, then if there are some of those one-time things.
Exactly. We do have that responsibility of getting it back, that last 200 plus K or whatever it is, 226,000. What is it, Christine?
The hole in the budget right now is 193,999.
Yeah, that one. But on top of that, that can become a discussion. When it was always been the sacred cow, but we've been using it, and it's just something to talk about.
I think it serves two purposes, right? Kind of goes with our keep those one-time items out of the mill rate increase part of it, but still paid for by dollars that have already been, folks have already been taxed for. So certainly something we can kick around if there are any big capital items coming this year, which there likely would be. Sean Murphy, our treasurer.
I would argue that capital expenditures are not one-time expenditures. That if you're not replacing this pickup truck this year, you have something else on the list, something else on the list. It's a continuous, that's why you have a schedule and try to juggle that schedule. I don't see them as one-time expenditures. As far as I know, from the time I've been involved with the town budgets, we've only had one expense that was capital expense that was not that was indeed a one-time expenditure, and that's that bridge. All right. So.
I mean, I agree. I think what would be helpful if maybe when we move to the next agenda item, there's got to be some sort of guidelines in terms of towns, like how much should be capital, like percentage wise, right? Like what?
Out of a $20 million budget, should there be
Right.
0.5% for
Right.
capital or whatever that might be?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the answer, but it's probably, if we're gonna really have a sustainable approach to keeping all the trucks running, everything, all the buildings, HVAC's working, it's kind of what the team was built for when we started talking about it. Okay. So we've kind of morphed into a budget kind of guidance discussion. So why don't we just go we'll continue with this, I think, and just finish up the discussion. So at the end of last meeting, the budget guidance discussion was really around what kind of number are we going to offer up to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed for where we expect their budgets to stay, or to how much they could grow or decrease. I was in town hall talking to Daryl a little bit, trying to understand what the grand list growth, what we could expect. He's committed to giving us some kind of guidance by the middle of this month. He says it won't be official. He says I'll have some kind of a trajectory line. It's something. It's for anything, because we want to offer up this guidance earlier rather than later, right? So without knowing how many dollars are coming in, I don't think it's very smart to say how much we could spend. So that's what I know about what I would think before we can offer some guidance. We have to know where our income is. Love to hear the thoughts of the rest of the Board of Finance on that.
I know everybody wants to know what the guidance is sooner rather than later. Christine, before she left tonight, was asking me, that timeline. And I said, well, we're gonna have that topic discussion tonight, but I don't know what to tell her, when we can have something reasonable. It's easy to say we want no increase, but we know all the staff in the school and in town hall, everybody wants to get their raises, and so do I. So I understand that, but what can we afford to provide them as guidance?
So maybe we talk about how we would calculate the guidance if and when we get the number.
Right.
Just put the framework in place, and that way it's just plug and play when we get it. Like, we could play around with I was trying to find the audit report, the grand list number. Last year.
Yeah, I guess.
It's last year.
So I guess the way I'm looking at it too is, we have a hole that we have to fill. It's half a mil or 4/10 of a mil, whatever it is. So if everybody got nothing, we're going to raise taxes by 0.4 mils, right? Just to make us whole again. Rough math is the way I look at that.
So there's your guidance.
Right?
I hate to use a word that seems foreign, but what's wrong with a reduction? 2% less than last year. Roll up your sleeves and show us.
Right. So it's interesting thought. I mean, we're all pressed with budgets at work and other we're doing, but it's that would result in fewer services, fewer roles, whatever it is.
But without understanding the impacts, we can't rule it out. We'd have to understand that. How would those services be impacted before we say that's too deep? Go flat or go 1% reduction. So,
So would you thought then be, Gary, to have the departments come in first and say, this is what we need first without providing guidance, and then the pushback should be, what would it mean if it was not this, it was this?
well, and it should be our own house also. I went through the audit report and I see a bunch of items in here where the budget ends in 3 zeros and the actuals ends in 3 zeros. Nobody can spend a 3 zeros. God himself can't spend a 3 zeros.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
No, okay.
I mean, so these numbers are kind of fungible. In fact, there's so many of these items that are actuals with 3 zeros. I wonder if we had enough in our lint draw to pay for the truck and not have to take it out of the undesignated fund, because it wasn't that big a number for the truck based on the town budget.
Yeah.
So I think at a time like this, we need to be a little bit more honest with each other about what it's actually costing each of these groups to run.
Right.
I know this is a different approach.
It's not a different approach. I've watched it the past 2 years. That's what
No.
we've done.
Yeah,
So
good.
So and I think they have come, for example, the Board of Education, we've pushed pretty hard on it in the last couple of years, and they've come back to tell us what the impacts would be. It'd be a special ed teacher, whatever the specifics were. I mean, there's a lot of
middle
different.
school sports, I think.
Yes, yeah, a lot of things that weren't really palatable for, we believed, for the population.
Mhm.
But doesn't mean we, as this body, shouldn't continue that, because that's our job, right? To keep the purse strings, keep all the services going, but still not raise taxes beyond what really need be raised.
I think we also need to consider what's been accepted through the ESSER funds. So what they're going to need to be maintained through that, as well as giving them an increase. I don't think that's maintainable by the town. So I think there's a lot that needs to be taken into account before automatically saying that there can be an increase.
So I wasn't on the board for the previous year. I was on the board last year. I watched for the previous year. I believe you didn't give any guidance for that year. And that's when the Board of Ed came in, and there was a lot of town response and reaction, because there was a lot of cuts. And the town reaction is good. Like, we want to hear from the town. They ended up, I think the increase was, I want to say it was like 3%. The Board of Ed came up like 3% or something like that. Last year was the first year I think actual guidance was given. It was 1.3%, and what came back was 1.7.
I think the guidance created some trust between the two boards that said, all right, we know you're not just giving us the same old cut it, dialogue, and therefore we're going to do our very best to meet that guidance. It was as close as I've ever seen it. If we go back and don't give guidance, I think what we should expect is I remember getting frustrated at you in a meeting about it, is like the political dog and pony show that happens, right? Okay, here's everything you lose. All the parents get mad, all the,
Right.
everybody comes out, and then we say, okay, never mind, we're not going to do that. We'll find something more palatable. Like there's that negotiation. They're two different strategies, and
It's probably what the cut, the truck was cut.
Right.
Things, yeah.
I think most of them years ago padded everything so that when you did take it away, they got what they wanted. So like Sarah says, if you can get the trust back so they tell you what you need and we can give it to them, we could probably keep running the way we're running without increasing too much. But if everybody figures that you're gonna cut them, they're gonna pad 5 or 6 things, knowing that they have room to cut it off later to make it look like they helped. So I don't know how to give them that trust, but
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in negotiations, for example, for the teacher salaries. There's 2% or whatever the number is increases. That's a fair number across however many teachers we get, 88 or 180, whatever the number is. That is a lot to absorb within the Board of Education, so it's a bigger part of our town's budget. It's a lot to absorb without having some major impacts, whether it be staff or programs or sports or whatever it might be. So it's a tough one we have every single year, but it's certainly not one we shouldn't ask them. Maybe the guidance is something like that's going to be more terrific pressure, downward pressure on budgets, and where could you land without saying 0 or +1 or -3, whatever the number is.
I mean, you said, what, 4 mil increase, 0.4 mil or something?
I think it was like 0.4 mil.
Yeah. I mean, at a minimum, I would say flat to last year, and with the caveat, we already know we're looking at an increase. Show us flat to last year.
I think that's kind of where some of the discussions have started every single year. After presentations, we eat from that. But again, I'm not afraid of that. But again, 1 of 8, right? And I think it's hard to give guidance without knowing our income, without really knowing impacts. I mean, we can give some guidance, and then Christine or Bob is going to come in and say, what the impacts would be of not getting any kind of increase. But it isn't right.
well, is there any way for us to wait until you get your info from Daryl? And at the same time, can we ask some of them, do they have any big items coming up that we're going to be foreseen that that they need right now that we don't want to cut, so we can figure out where we're at? Then at that point, once we have them 2 pieces of information, we should be able to give some guidance to them and say, well, according to what we think of, you need to go with this particular budget or this 1% up or 2% down.
I think it's time for that. I mean, we're just having this discussion about, I know budget guidance that was talked about last couple, for us to start building some kind of knowledge base so we can then tell these folks what we expect. I think Daryl's coming to talk to us next week after next. Will be helpful. I'm not sure exactly how much information he's going to have, but
He's gonna rub his crystal ball.
yeah, well,
Can I check the numbers real quick for Christine? Thank you for the audit report, but yeah, the printed copy.
okay.
So our revenue actual was 20,400,000 in the audit. You said that what was taken out of the undesignated fund was like almost 200,000. It was like 199
That's what we need to take out this year to balance the budget.
this year.
Yeah, in the
Right.
current budget, it's that 193,999 to make us even, where last year it was that 440
Right,
something,
right.
something.
So in theory, then our expenditures were not 20,407,000, which is the revenue, but our expenditures are 20,600,000-ish, right?
Our expenditures or whatever it says our expenditures are. You, for the audit purposes and budgeting, you have to look at them completely separate.
Yeah,
Because we may have brought in more than we projected in the budget. We may have spent less than we projected in the budget, but then we had additional appropriations, I think $286,000 last year because of different projects. So, we earmarked money out of the undesignated fund for that. That factors in the Board of Ed is spending 100% of their budget since it goes into the non-lapsing and moves into a different bucket.
Sure.
So. And then there were also COVID expenditures that were pulled out of expenses that we thought were going to be part of the regular budget. And then we found out about money after the fact. So that might be why some departments underspent last year. They didn't actually underspend. They just spent that money on COVID things that they thought were going to come out of their budgeted amounts. And then actually it came out of COVID grants
right.
when you're looking at the town side,
Right,
not
right,
the Board of Ed.
So, but 200,000 is what we're done, right? We closed the budget.
That year is closed, yes.
Yeah.
So whatever it
So
says
that-
in that audit,
Yeah.
whatever it says the revenue is what the revenue was, and whatever it says the expenditures were, what the expenditures were.
Okay. Without doing that math in my head,
Mhm.
the end game was we had to pull 200,000 out of undesignated to balance the closed budget, correct?
I don't know off the top of my head.
That's a reasonable way to look at that, right? We're saying 193,999.
If it says in the audit that we spent $200,000 more than we brought in, then yes.
Okay, so all right, so it's a good education for me. So I'm looking at page 61 and that says the BOE is 14,120,000-ish. Where do I find the municipal? Is there a summary that shows me all of it? Total general government is 5,108,000. Actual was 4. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just. Take a question from one of our selectmen.
Oh, sorry, please go ahead.
While we're looking for some information from the Board of Finance, Brett, you're recognized for a comment?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Sorry to interrupt, but Paul, I'm just wondering if when you speak, if you can speak closer to the microphone. It's really difficult to hear you.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
all.
I'm trying to make contact, but it's okay. I'll go
Oh,
on the quick
much
one
better,
for-
much better. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Sarah, go to page 7 in the audit. So general fund budgetary highlights is on page 7, bottom half of the page. So the actual revenue for the year was 20,407,264. The total expenditures was 20,646,879. So it was 239,615 that was used from the undesignated fund overall.
Okay, thank you. I'm apparently trying to piecemeal it together from the back sections. Okay, and what's a mill? What's 1/10 of a mill?
50
50?
something thousand, is that
So
right?
last year, a mill, I want to say was 527,000.
1 mil. Yeah, yeah.
Rounding.
Okay,
I'd have to.
so it is about half a mill.
Yeah.
That's come out of the budget. That's come out of our undesignated fund. That budget's closed, about half a mill.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so that's why in your reports for tonight has the undesignated fund report, which has the starting balance for the undesignated fund. Then we automatically take out what we budgeted to balance the current budget. And then I take out all the appropriations as we go. So that's
Yeah, so it started out like 3.3 and ended up at 3 point none.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think 3.952.
Right. Oh, you're good.
So if our grand list does not go up, if we have no additional revenue, we're in the hole 239,000-ish. If everybody keeps their budgets flat, like Gary says. I think it's unlikely, given that we just went through a
Valuation.
reval, that our revenue isn't gonna go up. If it was not, I think it's unlikely it won't, like, it should go up.
So it was a new company. So just the unofficial polls with my friends and neighbors. Values did weird stuff. I'd like to see what comes out of this. So we went from vision appraisals to the new company. They had a vastly different approach to how they valued properties.
I think part of that was also because it was COVID and they couldn't get inside of houses like they normally would.
Yeah, so normally I would agree with you. It's a reval year. We should see some sort of bump there. I'm not confident we're going to see that based on what I've heard from my neighbors. Some people went up and they were upset about it. A lot of people stayed flat or actually reduced.
A lot of people did construction with the pandemic because they were spending a lot more time at home. So I think we will have more. I think the grand list will go up because of all of those improvements to homes, personally. Not because I've been told that, but just the amount of revenue we've seen for building permits and different things. So it's, you know, making sure that those new, as they said in the presentation, making sure that those new elements of houses are then assessed for
Right.
the taxes.
But I don't think without clarity into that, we can give guidance other than flat, knowing that we've got a bogey to absorb.
Right. So talking to Daryl, it didn't seem like there was going to be a wildly increase to the grand list. He didn't say it was going down, but I don't want to steal his thunder either. I want him to tell us those facts. But yeah, go ahead with finish your thought there. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, we hope there's going to be some kind of increase. Will it be enough just to offset what we have to bring to make us whole? Will it
Yeah.
be something more than that? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's hard to predict.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, flat gets us exactly where we were at the last several town meetings where everybody was,
Screaming.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we had a truck that was in such insane disrepair because we had a zero capital budget in our municipal government and.
So just two things. I'm new to this process, but I've been setting a budget for 30 years and it really starts with have to have and nice to have. And I think that was the message that I got from the town meeting when we spent the money on the truck, which was, that was something that they really had to have, but it didn't come across in that communication last year and it got wiped because it was a need to have. And we can't do that again. So I feel like that's the part of the guidance is have to have versus nice to have. And we know that there's contracts that have to be paid. We know that inflation in this country has seen the highest growth in the last 3 quarters than it has in the last 10 years. And the cost of goods and services have gone up. So we might like to think that flat to zero is realistic, but we have to be actually financially realistic and understand that things are going to cost more. And those have to haves are going to cost more than they did last year. And the other piece to this is that the grand list is going to be interesting. And I think that is a huge piece to just try to understand.
Right.
And the people are going to want to know what our revenues are before
Exactly, yeah.
we try to tell them. what they're spending.
So it's really that what I'm hearing, it's not so much us telling them what we're going to allow you to spend. You tell us what you absolutely need to
Well,
spend.
there's some things that we know we have to pay, especially with the Board of Ed, the contracts have to be paid. There's nothing that we can do about that. So once you get that number, then everything around there just could potentially be viewed as a nice to have in the thing that's coming from the town expenditures. So, and I think that the onus needs to be on the boards and the commissions that are putting forth budgets to be really passionate about understanding the difference between have to and need. And they need to be able to communicate that as we go through the budget process in 2022.
Mhm. I think Mike had his hand up. Mike, go right ahead.
Thanks. One point I just want to make, I was looking at the page 7 as well. I see that the 239, the budget number that we still have to fill is 193, Christine, right?
For the year we're in right now, yes, but last year it was higher than that.
I don't get that. What do you mean by that?
So the audit is last year where it was the 440,000. This current year that we're in right now is the 193.
Okay. So that 239 number was actually less than what we planned on needing when it came actual. We thought we were going to need 400 and something $1,000, and we ended up needing 239.
Yes. Short answer, yes.
Okay. So that's, we got to keep that out of the picture. I mean, it's all nice that it worked out in the end. That just means we had more money in the undesignated fund than we thought. But when it comes to the budget itself and filling our budget gap, the number is the 193 number that we have to fill as we go forward for this new budget.
Right, and that's that 3.5 tenths. I don't have my calculator here.
Right, exactly. So as we're listening to Daryl, that's the one we have to
Right.
know when we're giving our guidance. Are we in a hole or are we not in a hole? And then I think one of the big things is, I think I can't remember who said it, but I think finding out are there any from the capital group, what are they planning? What do we have coming up that is a need to have? Because if there's a good sized capital budget, all things else being equal, or as we're just talking about, it's the inflation's going up, and I think nothing's going to really stay. Hopefully, it stays flat. But we know that budget, the normal contractual increases and what have you, that the likelihood of that's slim to none. But is their capital budget going to be something that there's a lot of needs there?
Right.
So one thing I was thinking, which we haven't done in the past that I think might be beneficial is, as we have the presentations from Public Works, EDC, Land Use, the library, the fire company, the ambulance association, maybe before all those presentations, there should be a presentation of the capital improvement work group of what they are putting forward to the Board of Selectmen, a joint presentation, just like those other ones, to the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen from the capital plan of this is what we are moving forward to the Board of Selectmen for the budget. And then there can be guidance from the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance of, okay, you're trying to save up money for a particular project. This is not the year to do that. So we know that those are the items to cut from the plan. And, we need a truck for the animal control officer. Make sure we understand that that's important. Make sure you leave that in the plan. So maybe we should take that approach this year and add that into the schedule that I'm drafting as we said.
Right. And when we usually start those presentations?
It's
February.
So what I'm looking at right now is pushing back the due date of the budget to January 14th instead of the first Friday in January. And then the Board of Selectmen would then have their general review discussion on the 25th. Presentations would be February 2nd and 9th, with the Board of Selectmen starting to make their review on the 15th, and then presenting to the Board of Finance on the 23rd, Board of Ed presentation on the 16th. It's all very, very tight, especially since no ask has gone out to anyone yet for their budgets. So I think if there's going to be a budget form that's going to go out for anyone to fill out, we need that at your next meeting on the 15th, so I can send it out the next day. I'm planning to present a draft schedule for the budget process to the Board of Selectmen on the 14th, which would then be submitted to you on the 15th. And then asks would go out on the 16th, and they have less than a month, at least if it's the second week of January. People who meet the first week or the second week of the month have enough time to have their meetings to get it done. You know, our departments will do what they can to get it done as quickly as possible, but we need to give people time to get things together if we're going to get a solid, coherent budget back from them.
Right.
So we need to move aggressively at this point.
So one of the big pieces is Daryl's comments. I mean, I know we have doubts about how finite those numbers can be, but I mean, that's the biggest part of our income, right? So we have to know what the grand list is. So we'll invite him here next meeting on the 15th. I don't think we meet again this month after that, or is there another one? That's it, right? And then our meeting, the coming first meeting in January, we'll understand, you know, what our income is, but
Yeah, typically your second meeting in January is when the assessor reviews the grant list, because that's when he has the numbers. The only reason I am skeptical on what information he's going to have is he's still pricing motor vehicles right now. They're still putting in personal property applications and declarations. So he may have information on real estate, but I know he's not gonna have a full picture on the rest of it.
so you think it's a waste of time for us to try to do anything?
No, I think it's important to hear where we're at, and, you know, he may have a trend and
Right.
kind of have a rough idea, but I just don't think that you can put all your eggs in that basket.
Right. So how do you guys feel about not providing guidance? Asking the departments to come to us with their budgets, and then we're gonna look at our income and our balance sheet and say, okay, that's great, but we can only afford this. Is that really the direction that we should, please?
So the town side, everything gets submitted into the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Ed and school handle their budget. They're not going to present to you until February. That gives you time to give them guidance for what they've gotten from everyone else. So you can give your guidance to the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen in January, so then they know how they need to trim.
Before they present to us, which is 4 weeks later, whatever it is.
I agree with that. I don't think we can really give guidance until we know from Daryl in late January what we're looking at. And I think if we can, like Christine just said, if we can get a presentation from that capital improvements work group earlier rather than later to see what the needs are, we're gonna have a good idea of what we're up against. Because, you know, let's just assume that Board of Ed's going to go up 1.7%, and, you know, general government's going to go up 1%. You know, the other big picture is, what do we have for revenue and what do they want for capital? We know what the debt is.
Right.
So,
that feels like a lot of, go ahead.
Sorry, I mean, I'm looking at this, the capital's 800,000. It doesn't really move the needle on 20.5. I hear you. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, we should really be focusing on where the big spends are,
Right.
because
I mean, 800,000 though, that's 1.5 mils.
And that might have been 800,000 with additional appropriations, because this year's current capital budget is less than $250,000.
so the beginning balance was 311, the general fund budget was 502. So the total was 813, according to this. So I'm just rough numbers. So, I mean, we certainly it's a data point, but it's not really gonna help us solve our problem.
I mean, it's a million.
We don't know what's going down the pike though, Gary. That's the thing, because we cut everything out. And the capital improvements subcommittee there, they basically spent a lot of time, and we said, all right, thanks very much. No thanks. So they might have a lot more things that we need. I mean, without going back to where we were last year when they first proposed their budget, I mean, this Board of Selectmen, there was a lot more in there.
Okay. Who sits on that board?
So the capital improvement work group is the first selectman, myself, the highway foreman, the planning, development and zoning official, the fire chief, the ambulance president. We ask for a representative from the Board of Education to come. Gary's going to be there for the Board of Finance.
We know Gary's gonna be there. So heads of all,
Yes, so
Yeah.
anyone who may have large scale projects or will
Gotcha.
know, like I'm there to represent all the other departments and groups that might have something in the list
right.
that isn't public works or emergency services.
And what's the expectation of that meeting tomorrow? Is it really to have Monday, excuse me,
Monday.
Monday, the next meeting, the first meeting? Is it really to have a whole list of second meeting? Oh, man, she have a lot of decisions then made. So,
Yeah, the first meeting was put everything in this chart that you think you want to have in there.
right,
And so the meeting on Monday is going to be, okay, what are we taking out?
right.
So, sorry, it's just, and it's more appropriate for possibly Monday's discussion, but do you run a 3-year or 5-year capital
5-year.
plan? So you try to levelize that spend?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the emergency services actually puts together a 20-year plan for their
Yep.
vehicles. And the highway department has the same thing, but for the general town plan, we do a 5-year.
Cool.
Am I, in assuming that the capital fund has the 2 rental agreements in it, the one for the pump truck and the one for the ambulance? So that amount is already set to spend out of whatever we got?
Yep, and we also have a lease for over the rail mower for about 25,000. That's in there as well.
Okay, so that capital's already this big to start with
Mhm.
before we even get there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and certain things, which we'll do a better job of explaining this year as we come into things, but certain things are in the budget that have a revenue offset to them. So we have money in the capital plan for renovations and improvements to the John Dean Gallup House, but that's eligible for grants from the State Historic Preservation Office. So we have to budget both the town's match and the state grant in the expenditures, but then in the revenue side, we put in the grant from the state.
So I guess I'm having a hard time seeing beyond what Daryl might be able to tell us for a trend line next meeting. Right? I mean, I think that would be our next step, and there's 14 steps after that, but I can't see beyond that at this point. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I don't want to have a longer conversation, but I think it's going to come down to 2 things. Like, we're not going to suddenly have an extra $1 million in our grant list. We know that, right?
I think it's fair.
So there's the position that we just don't raise the budget at all. Or there's the position that if we have to raise the budget, what do we think that looks like?
It probably starts with Daryl's data, right? Does he have enough to at least make us whole, which is 0.4 of a mil?
Yeah.
And then anything beyond that is going to be a tax increase. And the voters are going to tell us that, but and then we say, how much is palatable, right? What is the need versus the want? Okay, you Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, you're telling us what you need, but it's a 4 mil increase. Probably not going to happen, right? So I think there's time for some baby steps. We'll get Daryl in. I'll invite him in for next session. See if we get some kind of a trend line. I don't know that we'll have anything too comprehensive from the capital board by then, but we put them on the agenda as well. If Bob's going to lead that meeting, or you're going to lead that meeting, we'll put you on that agenda for next week and next session, and let's start there.
I also think you need to, if the Board of Finance is going to have a form that you want filled out we need that for the next meeting.
If there was a-
I have the draft from last year. I'll send it to the email. You guys can let me know if there's any changes you want in it, and then I'll have it for the meeting on the 15th. I will do my meeting from home, so I have my computer. I can share.
Okay, I think those are the bits that we need to start to get ready to offer budget guidance. Oh, please go right ahead.
On the January 8th community conversation meeting, Bob, that you're holding, do you plan on talking about the state of the fiscal economy of the town, or is that not a planned topic?
First topic would be what to do with the facility.
Okay.
Second topic is what to do. That's, I mean, when you have a community conversation, you can't get off on multiple topics, it's regular session, so you gotta kind of pick either one topic or space is two, or splitting it into two different boxes. It can come to both halves, or it can come to one or the other. But yeah, to do it through conversation, you really want to, I didn't have this to zone in on one thing that the town needs to get an answer on. And these are two things the town needs to get answered. So yeah, we don't support the multi-budget right now.
I'm just gonna repeat that for the public. You can correct me if the folks on the line. Yeah, so the two topics are, sorry, I'm looking at your space. The two topics are gonna be what to do with the 298 building. And and the rest of the ARPA funds. Thank you.
So I guess I'll follow up with a question of, in the past, have we tried to take a pulse of the community? I guess we're all probably under the impression nobody wants to pay more taxes, but reality might be different than that. So is there a way to get kind of feedback from people and what they're thinking and what they're expecting, especially coming off of the last 2 years where everything has changed? And
There is. I think it's in the form of a town hearing, right? That's how we actually get these.
but that's when we present numbers to them.
That's right.
There's nothing that happens or could happen before that?
Well, I mean, it'd be another town meeting of some ilk. I mean, I'm not sure that we've ever had it, but. for
Okay, so
Selectman
I
Carlson,
think,
yes.
I think there are gonna be some things that are gonna come into play this year that have it. When you do speak to Darrell, I spoke to him today, there was about a $225 increase in car tax money that wasn't budgeted for, which you'll find out when he talks to you. I just learned that today.
You said 225,000?
I did say 225,000.
Okay.
I also, in speaking to the Board of Ed recently, you know, we get about 12,500 roughly for tuition from an out-of-town student. We have 5 from Volantown this year. We're supposed to have 7, 2 from Preston, 5 from Volantown. The Preston people held that back their students because they wanted to keep them in their COVID bubble this year.
Right.
We could get some students next year, but from what I had heard, there was over 26 Volantown students that were applying to come to our school. 26 students on top of the 5 that stay, and I've heard the 5 are doing very well. You could have close to 30 students at 12.5. I mean, do the math, it's probably somewhere around $400,000.
Very.
We know there's 3 solar projects, one we approved last night to move forward. We won't see that money this year, but those 3 solar projects could mean as much as $1 million to the town starting next year's budget. We can't use it this year, but because they're just going to start construction on the 3rd one, the one they're going through the siting council today. But the one up on Ella Wheeler has started, and the one on the Lewis Farm on Boombridge has started. We won't be able to capture that money this year, but we will be able to capture it starting next year. They pay taxes on the property now, but the kind of taxes they'll be paying once these are fully operating solar farms are going to be big dollars. So that's coming in. There's going to be also some discussions about cutting some expenses in some areas. I don't want to go in right this second, but so there's some things happening. Also, I'm starting a group meeting once a quarter with the first selectmen of Preston, Volantown, and Griswold, and ourselves. Reason I'm doing this, they're 4 like towns. Nobody wants to pay taxes in these 4 towns. Probably most towns could say that, but we have similar problems, and we're going to talk about things like shared services. It's 4 towns that make up a region of like people. You know, we think the same way. They're rural. We have some of the same problems. So I'm not including Stonington in the group or Legend because I think their problems may be different than ours. So I think we're working to go to shared services, even shared services between maybe our Board of Ed and our town. I mean, there's a lot of dominoes falling lately that we're going to have some discussions on that. We know that there's a superintendent leaving. There's other people in the board in the school system that are leaving. We're getting a new computer system in that is going to be the same as what they're using, the software. So why not now, when all these things are happening, we have to start those discussions on how we can share services between this town and the school system. So I think this place is to save, and I think there's going to be some increase in income. It's not going to be like hitting the lottery, but good increases in income to the town over the next few years. So we'll see what happens, but I think you'll have, when Daryl does speak to you, there might be some things that'll be beneficial for you to hear. And if the thing comes through with the students from Voluntown, and if there is truly an increase, you told me today, in taxes on motor vehicles.
Yeah.
I mean, those two numbers right there will help the budget quite a bit.
It sure does. It sure does. It sounds like exciting news for future
So
years.
I'm trying to be the glass half full guy right now.
No, it's good. That's good. I mean,
Okay.
and again, it's just an arithmetic thing, right? So that
It is.
whatever the numbers are, they are. Most of them won't be this year, but some might be. That motor vehicle might close that hole for us and make us whole. And then we can decide where we go from there.
And we may have to have another, when it comes to the budget, we may have to have another tight year. This year, knowing that things may loosen up a year from now.
That's what I'm feeling, just by what you said right here. But we'll see. We'll see what the numbers, what the
Alright.
numbers show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does Bob have a date where he wants some guidance by? That's what I'm looking at the minutes from last year. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
The
So
better
my-
question is, does my admin finance director have a date? Thank you.
So Mike, looking at what I was putting together, we would want to have the presentations from the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen to the Board of Finance starting on the 16th. So they would need guidance earlier than that,
16th of February.
of February, yeah. So I mean, if Daryl gives a presentation, his regular presentation,
On the
your
19th.
second meeting in January, that would be on January 19th. So, yeah. So I don't know if maybe after the first presentations on the second, you give guidance then.
And we'll know a lot more by then. Sounds like we're gonna get some positive news from our next meeting. We won't have the whole picture, but
Can we get the capital guys in on the 5th then?
actually, I was gonna invite him here next session on the 15th.
Okay.
That won't be ready for a final presentation.
Not final, but again, is it,
My vision was a final presentation,
it was.
but it's your board.
Right. I'm just trying to sneak up on this thing a little bit, so we don't get everything, a big data dump in 1 week, right? We know what the adders are gonna be, we know what the minuses are gonna be, and we'll start putting that together to build a vision. If you're willing to come present, Bob. Right, right. Okay. Just take it back to your chair with you.
I like it when just Sarah says what I meant to say. So yeah, I think I don't mind having them in. I like to have them in themselves
I
to
understand.
present. I mean, I can present for them, but there's more skin in the game if they have to tell you what they really needed. I think that's one of the issues last time with the truck with the highway department. I mean, we were speaking for Donnie, where if he was speaking for himself, he would have had a better case on why he really needed that truck. So my opinion is if to have them in.
Right, I wouldn't think it's gospel when you come in, nor what Daryl's going to tell us, but I think just getting some idea about what we can expect, because it's all going to get dumped on us the week of the middle of January, and 2 weeks later, we got to have a plan.
When we meet with them on Monday at 5, and we can run that by them to say, the Board of Finance requested to have you come in to give you a preliminary plan on what it is you think you're going to need.
That would be great.
And then, as Winona said, what's a need and what's a want, what's a need and what's a nice to have versus a need to have, right? So.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Paul.
Go ahead, Mike.
Could, I mean, couldn't they come in on if they're not ready by the by the 15th, couldn't they come in on the 5th? And then we meet with Daryl on the 19th
So
officially, and then
January?
but after that, we should be able to give them some guidance on after that meeting.
For sure. But do we really want to wait to the 11th hour to?
I'm just saying, if they're not ready by the 15th. to
I mean,
give
if
a
there's
presentation.
zero to talk about, if they have no idea what we want for capital, I agree. There's really no reason for anybody to come in. If Daryl has nothing to talk about, there's no reason. We can cancel the meeting. But it's, I like to hear these things, gives me time to absorb these things. I'm sure everybody else.
I agree.
You want them. They may not be final. They're not going to be final, but at least to have some trending. But I'm hearing you. I mean, if it's nothing to talk about, there's no reason to talk.
No, I think we should hear from Daryl. If Daryl has some preliminary stuff and these guys have some preliminary stuff and they, but I'm saying we have another meeting on the 5th that they could give us something better,
I'm with you. So we have some tentative plan on building some budget guidance. So if everybody's all set with that, I can move on to the next agenda item, which is financial reports. They were all in everybody's inbox. We've all scanned some. I did the taxes, I think were a little bit better than we were last year. That looked nice.
Yeah, so I was able to go back to using the old format. So what I just want to highlight on the tax report is that we are working with a new firm, American National Recovery Group, and they are aggressively going after the back taxes for personal property and motor vehicle. So for the month of October, they collected $11,050.38. So I think that's very helpful. We are ahead with collections. And I just wanted to remind everybody that, it's the first meeting in December. So we are reviewing October's financials so that we have time to reconcile everything. So instead of it being the month before, it's 2 months before. So that's why we're looking at October and not November.
The 11,000 that was collected, do we pay a percentage of that back to the group?
No, there's a 15% fee that is the taxpayer has to pay. Nothing, the town collects everything that's due to the town in interest and fees and taxes, and then the taxpayer has to pay an additional percentage on top of that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Christian, the best thing to pull up. Was there anything else riveting on that? It's almost here.
Tax report was, it's, I'm just happy we're back to the standard. So you can look, because I did include all the pages on the cash report. So just real quick, the first section of it is the grand rate book balance sheet report. And so that is the collections up through the end of October for all of those years in the system. If you look at the cash report, which is the next section, that is just what was collected in the month of October. So those are the differences between those two reports. And then the last few pages are the 2020 reports. So you can compare last year to this year.
Okay.
So that is what will be in this package moving forward for you guys. Then on the general government profit and loss, again, it is through October. I will just highlight that we are continuing to pay expenses for 298 Norwich Wesley Road out of B2710 because it is not budgeted. So that is a subcategory B2710. So B27.101 is a subcategory for 298 Norwich Wesley Road. The Board of Ed is being assessed 15% of all utility bills because they occupy 15% of the square footage of the building. And I think those are the only things to highlight. And then the other report was the undesignated fund use for this fiscal year. So the beginning balance was $3,398,740. And with the additional appropriation that was approved at the town meeting, we are at $3,042,535.
Great, thank you for that.
And the Board of Ed financials were not approved by the Board of Ed, so that's why they are not included in your packet.
Thank you for requesting those.
Thank you for saying that, because I thought we were gonna have, Christine wanted to come like once a month to go through the report with us.
She did ask if we want her here at some interval, but
Yeah.
is monthly something that we're,
She had said she was going to come to the meeting when the financials were here, but I think
Okay,
maybe she
gotcha.
knew that they didn't have them for us.
okay, gotcha.
So
I did have a question about 298. Remind me that the expense we had for last year, that was paid out of the ARPA fund?
no.
No.
So there was discussion of paying it out of the ARPA funds. We did an additional appropriation for rounding $96,000 to cover a lot of the expenses. With the way that the budget works is it's the general department can't be over. So B27
Right.
as a whole needed to be under. So we didn't end up having to do any additional appropriations or transfers to finalize that. Everything was squared away. So it was an undesignated fund additional appropriation of 96,000 rounding, and no additional money was transferred.
So we could expect somewhere around that this year.
So my estimate for invoices for 298 North Wesley Road on an annual basis is $150,000. So you can estimate about 15% of that would be coming out of the Board of Ed, but they are only responsible for paying 15% of utilities. Any repairs that happen to the building are not assessed to them. So it's not a true 15, you can't say 15% of the 150,000. But yes, so that's where we're at right now. We'll see what happens at the conversation on January 8th on what the town wants to do with the building. You just need to remember that any sections of the building that are left remaining will have costs associated with them. So I look at it as a third, a third, a third. So the section we're in right now is a third where the central administration offices are. The 2-story is a third, the 1-story is a third. So if we were to demolish the 1-story wing, we would still be left with approximately $100,000 in bills.
Best case scenario. I mean,
Correct.
yeah, I don't see us saving a third.
So
Have we done anything to dial the utilities back in the 2/3 of the building we're not using? Heat, water, lights.
We haven't done that.
Bob, you can just literally take that to your seat because you can hand it to Sean if he needs to talk.
nothing.
It has brand new batteries.
There it is.
Okay, so, yeah, obviously we're not using any electricity in the 1-story or the 2-story because there's nothing there. We've kept the heat well down to this point. One thing that Christine forgot to mention is, so last 2 years when Mike was trying to move the 1-story wing, there was a lot of painting, a lot of lipstick been put on the pig over there, right? So we had a realtor over here, he was trying to move the building. So the crews were here painting and cleaning and getting the building to look nice for it to be rented. That stuff's not happening anymore. And we've kind of stopped at this point until we have the conversation on the 8th. Once we have that conversation, if the town determines that we want to take that 1-story wing down and we figure out how we're going to appropriate the funds for that, could be a combination of 3 different ways, could be through lending, could be through undesignated, could through, with the information we just heard tonight, could be through opera funding to a point, you know? So I think that once we have that direction, and we know that if that building's coming down or they're both coming down, then we can completely shut them off or put things in the line to keep it, you know.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure, Is it one zone? Is it two zones? How's it heated? What
The
runs?
two-story wing handles the two-story wing in all this section.
Right.
The one-story wing is on its own. It has its own boiler system.
So the climate we're enjoying tonight is also for the part that's not being, yeah, okay, that's
Yep.
what I need, okay. There's an opportunity.
Christine, the budget for this town at 298 was 27,131. Is that for 4 months or just 3? Yeah,
It depends on how the bills have hit. So this would be expenses for July, August, September, and October, but it may not reflect. It should be 4 months of invoices. They may
all right,
not.
so that works out to 67,867, 7,000. 7,000 times 12.
This is not the winter.
So, all right, so there's no gas bill, there's no,
These are the summer
okay,
bills.
I'm just trying to figure out my head. Thank you.
I wish it was a
Yeah.
equalized amount over 12 months. It is not.
And do you have the breakdown between the electric, the gas and the, once we get to where we decide to do what we're doing?
I have not recreated the spreadsheet that we created in the past. If we want to do that for the community conversation, I'll talk to
Well, I'm
Bob
saying
and
after,
see.
after the meeting, we could probably try, if we have to trim stuff off. Okay.
Any other questions for Christine on the financial reports? Okay. Mike, I'm sorry. Question?
Not necessarily a question so much, but a comment on, I've had it like, had people tell me like, calling it a profit and loss statement, it seems like a misnomer. Because we're not a business. Is it like a
It's a
revenue versus expensive report?
It's a QuickBooks label. The name of the report in QuickBooks is profit and loss budget.
I was
versus-
wondering that if it has to be called that.
Yes. So when we switch to Infinite Visions, it probably won't be called that, but I don't know yet.
It's semantics, but it, particularly
There's
when it
no
comes.
profit in this town.
Right, and that's what I want. I don't want people to think we have a profit, or the Board of Education has a profit, particularly. It's not a profit situation here.
Right. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
The next agenda item is future strategies. Feels like we hit quite a bit of that tonight. So I think the future strategy will be to try to get some folks in here to give us some information on what we want for capital, what we made on motor vehicle taxes, what the real estate taxes are. So I'm happy to move on past that if everybody else is willing.
Do we have, I'm sorry, Paul, do we have to vote on the financial reports and just vote to accept them as presented?
I'm hearing that there's no need to vote on those from Christine.
Okay, we do it with our nonprofit, so I just want to make sure that we're all set there.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you. The last item on the agenda is a motion to adjourn. Do I have one? Motion to adjourn. And a second. Thank you. Gary made it, you second. Thank you all. That was fun stuff. And that was 2117.
Thank you, guys.